it yet, and you haven't heard it yet. We have not yet walked in the governmental authority of God. We have not. We are getting there, and a lot of us are talking about it. But as you notice that when a lot of us begin to talk about it, because we're pioneering this new governmental authority, we're all getting hit with massive amounts of slander. But it doesn't make it any less true. Let me remind everyone, honey. Everyone thinks that Jesus just had 12 disciples. He didn't. It started off with thousands of followers. Thousands of disciples were following him. Then it went down to 300. Then it went down to 120. Then it went down to 12. Then it went down to 3. Then it went down to 1. And I'm talking intimacy. I'm not talking that they weren't Christians anymore and the disciples weren't following Christ anymore. I'm talking about the intimacy. 1,000 were following him while he was meeting their needs. 1,000 were following, thousands, as long as he was healing, as long as he was feeding, as long as he was meeting the fleshly needs of the people, they were there to follow him. They loved him. Once he started talking about crazy things, and they did, they called him crazy, they called him a heretic. Now, these are the people that follow God, that follow the Torah. He started getting a little wacko to them. He started going, well, you've got to eat my flesh and you've got to drink my blood, right? He started getting supernatural. He started getting all Enoch with them, all right? He started getting into a place where he was doing things that were not of the flesh. So they started dwindling because they didn't understand. Even then, there was only 3 that went up and was taken up to a higher level, to the Mount Transfiguration, where they saw Jesus change. Only 3. And then out of that 3, there was only 1, John, who partook in Jesus' suffering on Calvary. He took it upon, he was the only one at the cross. All the others had left him. John was there to partake his suffering on the cross. Let me tell you this. I've lived it. I'm living it now. And it is by choice. But let me tell you this. If you don't hear anything, hear this. If we are going to have his glory magnified in us, we must also be identified in his suffering. The closer you get to ascending with him, the closer you get to operating in signs, miracles, and wonders, the closer you get to the supernatural, the closer you get to being a mystic with God, this is what befalls on you. You share the same suffering as Christ. Because this is what's going to happen to you. You are going to be rejected. You are going to be accused. You are going to be slandered. You are going to be defiled. You're going to be called a blasphemer. You're going to be beaten and you're going to be bruised. People are not going to like you. They're not going to hear you and they're going to call you crazy. Why? Because you stepped out of the flesh and now you became ascended and one with God. And now you are a heretic. And it doesn't mean that they're not saved and they don't love God. It means that you get to decide how close into the Holy of Holies do you want to get. And you're only getting there, and his glory is only magnified in you when you partake in his suffering, for 1, and for 2, you make yourself pure in unity with God. Number 1, you do not live as the world does. The world always lives in their flesh. Many Christians still live in their flesh because they have one foot in the world and religion and Christianity mumbo jumbo, and then they have another foot trying to pray up to God, wondering why their prayers are not answered and wondering why when they pray for someone, no one gets healed, and wondering why they're sick themselves. The world is sterile and unable to reproduce anything. Some in the physical, yes. Because, why? They're exchanging the normal relationships for same sex and they can't physically produce, absolutely. But I'm talking about the world can't produce any offspring that's fruitful, mentally, physically, emotionally. They have been covered in darkness and they just cannot see. And they cannot see because they refuse to do the will of the Father for their lives. But the saddest thing about it is that what they do not understand, and it's not the Father that's wanting so badly for them to not have fun and put restrictions on their life. It is the heart of the Father to stop the consequences that's coming on their life because of the decisions that they're making in the dark. It's causing them to be sick. It's causing them to be mentally tormented. It's causing them to be physically sick. It's causing all of these things that they think it's his fault when really it's their decisions that's causing these things to happen, and they will not do the will of the Father. So they can't see. So the veils keep falling on top of them until that it's so dark that even if Jesus Christ himself would stand in front of them, some of them would still not see him. This is why in the Bible, when the Lord did his biggest miracle, which is raise Lazarus from the dead after 4 days of him decaying, that the entire town came and they wanted to kill the miracle. What? You mean you want to kill a man that was raised from the dead? You wanted to kill the miracle and Jesus? That is mind-blowing, but that is reality of the will of the world who lives in the flesh that constantly wants to do their own will and not God's. They do not see the will of the Father. They don't see Christ. They cannot see. In this state, the flesh rules sexually, perversionally, sensuality-wise, and greed. It rules the flesh. Number 2, write this down, how to be in union with the Father so we can live in an ascended, mature son and daughter existence. Number 2, you have to strip off all of your old nature. All of it. The old nature cannot come if you're going to be in union with God. The old nature has no truth in it. It's all flesh. The former behavior and nature will be buried in a deep grave if you allow the Lord to kill it. The Lord loves burning flesh. He loves the aroma of it. If you do not take off your old nature, there is no new nature that can be put on you. There will be no mixing. Understanding that you are a new species in Christ when you believe in your heart, profess with your mouth, believe that Jesus is God. You are a new creation. So none of the new things are allowed to be attached to you. They're not even allowed. It's not even permissible. And the reason why people seem no different when they're saved years later is because they have allowed the enemy to tell them that they are not worthy and that they are not a new species and that the Lord didn't do anything for them because they don't feel like it. That's a lie from hell. The old nature has to be buried in a watery grave. Number 3, to be in union with God. We've talked about this earlier. You must renew your mind and your spirit. Being led by the Spirit is like going to the gym. You've got to train it to do so. We are so used to being led by our flesh and everything our flesh wants that some of you can never hear the voice of God because you haven't trained up your spirit, man. It doesn't mean that the Lord is not talking to you. It just means that you don't know how to hear from your spirit because you've never operated or trained it. Your spirit is here. It's in the belly. You have to learn how to shut your flesh up. I often joke with my husband, and I'm like, I have to often tell my flesh, you don't boss me around, I boss you around. You do not tell me what to do. Flesh, I tell you what to do. Right. Killing the flesh and training up your spirit, man, because the flesh and the spirit are at war. One's going this way, another one's always going this way. So you're going to be tugging like this if you don't learn how to get control of either one of them. The flesh is going to tug you to absolute destruction, and the spirit is so gentle of a tug. It's gentle. You may not ever feel it, but you need to lean into it because this is going to lead you to a mature son and daughter. This way is going to lead you to righteousness.